Oh no, the table's out again. Well, here's that VFR I mentioned. Or wait, here's that VFR I mentioned. We don't get to have a very good look at it just yet in its proper state when it's all assembled, because it barely made it off my truck and it ended up in this position. I just couldn't wait to get into it, I guess. But overall, it was actually in very good shape. The fairings, the tank, everything pretty good, really, for the age and the mileage. It's an 02. It's got, I think, 70 something thousand kilometers on it. It's got a very nice titanium Hindle slip-on exhaust. It's got racks for hard bags. Doesn't have the bags, of course. They were sold separately. So yeah, why is it in this shape? What's going on? Well, that lovely mess is a nice indication of why. Or I guess it's not why it's in that shape, but the wiring harness ended up being one of the many victims along the way. Someone attempted to fix this. So here's what happened when I brought it home. I stripped it down. I thought it was going to be something simple. The complaint was the bike will not run, the fuel pump will not prime. The bike shut down while the guy was driving it. Now, cycle the key, no fuel pump. Okay, simple enough. This right here is a relay that powers up with your ignition. So when I got home, first thing I did, flip the key on. This relay gets signal power to turn it on, but it's not turning on. It's getting power, doesn't get ground. So check the wiring diagram and it leads me to what I was expecting to find. This, the bank angle sensor, the tip over switch, as it's sometimes called. All this thing does is provide ground to this relay so it can turn on when the bike is vertical. If the bike falls over, tip over switch deactivates the ground path and the relay dies. When the relay dies, everything dies. So when I realized that there was no ground coming here, I was pretty happy because that's simple, it's just this. But on my way in there, it's tough to tell right now because everything is just ripped apart, but this blue connector, it usually lives down here and it separates the front harness in the front cowl from the rest of the bike. Now, if you know VFRs, and I don't, but I'm learning, there was a big recall on this harness because they were terrible for overheating, melting, burning up wires, which began to happen at one point, but I think this bike has had the recall done because this harness is a little bit different than a stock one. This green wire right here is ground, and if you look on this harness, it is not there, which tells me that that is most likely the updated harness from the recall because they moved the ground path to another place. Anyway, when I got to this connector, this wire was cut and just sitting there. There's the other end of it here. This was under the frame coming out here. So that made me wonder, why is that wire cut? But, you know, just the overall shape of this harness. Like, I did not do this to this harness. It was, all the covering was ripped off of it in the beginning. Someone else did that. So by seeing a wire cut didn't really surprise me because some ape has already been at this. So back up here, all I did, since this sensor only provides ground to that relay, I simply jumped a little jumper wire from it over to ground on the headlight plug, grounded the relay powered up. When the relay powers up, it sends power to a whole bunch of things on the bike. Injectors, coils, sensors, etc. And one of the main things it does, it sends power over to this relay. This relay is the fuel pump relay. So once it powers up this relay, the ECM grounds it to turn it on and activate your fuel pump. So flip the key on, power coming over to this relay, but it's not activating. The ECM is not turning it on. So why isn't the ECM doing that? And I traced it back, checked the wiring diagram again. Turns out that this cut wire is where power gets from this front cowl harness to the rest of the bike to power up those injectors and coils and everything else, including the ECM. So, of course, just quickly connect this wire back up, and we should be in business. So connect the wire, jump this, flip the key on, and I hear snap back there. Uh-oh. We come back here. There are two main fuses on this bike. One on the starter solenoid, like a lot of bikes, and another in this little harness right here. It lives right in this holder. So that popped. Okay, consult the wiring diagram again. What does this fuse power? Start tracing all kinds of stuff. Start unplugging all kinds of stuff, one thing at a time, trying to find out what is causing the dead short. So we go through the bike, one thing at a time, unplugging, disconnecting, bigger junctions where we can, which will eliminate a lot of the things on the engine. Still dead short. So I narrow it down. The final thing that powers up with that relay is the ECM itself. My number one fear getting into this is starting to come to realization. Here is the ECM. If you take, I forget which pins it is right now, but if you take the main power supply pin and the main ground pin and you ohm it out with a multimeter, you get 0.7 ohms, which is basically dead short. So the ECM is fried. I was hoping that maybe it was just power passing through the ECM and traveling to somewhere else on the bike, and something else on the bike was actually shorting out. But I've used my power probe to power only the ECM, and it shorts out the power probe, so we know it's bad. And the good news, though, I did power up the fuel pump in the tank, and it does run. It runs fine. So I was thinking, best case scenario, it's a tip over switch. Whoever owned the bike just didn't have a clue how to fix electrical problems, and it was simple. Well, and then I thought, worst case scenario, it's a bad ECM. Well, what do you know? That wasn't worst case scenario, because worst case scenario is both of them are bad. But I budgeted for the possibility of the bad ECU, and I budgeted at a price that was actually about $200 more than I managed to find one on eBay. So that's good. As long as I pop that ECM in there and this bike fires up, we are still in good shape. I originally planned to not get attached to this thing, just quick flip, pick it up for cheap, fix it for cheap, get it back out sold, make a few bucks on it. That's still the plan. I don't even want to try ride it too much if I get it going, because I have this weird feeling that I'm going to like it and I might not want to get rid of it. But I mean, it has no need to stay right now where you're getting a little cramped for space in here. So yeah, this is the VFR. Here's some oddball things I noticed. How bad do you want frame sliders? Look at this. They've cut a hole through the coolant reservoir to mount these frame sliders. It's crazy. And another thing, I've seen bikes with ABS. There's one right there. I've seen bikes with linked brakes. My buddy's ST1300 has linked brakes. This is the first one I've had my hands on that has linked brakes and ABS. It's a mess. Look at it, we've got like modulator valves here. We've got more valves down under here that are hard to see because they're buried. But we've got steel brake lines just everywhere. It's like a rat's nest of brake lines. It's inside the frame, over the frame, under the frame. There's 4 brake lines coming just to the front 2 calipers. It's crazy. It's just a slightly overly complicated system, which just screams Honda. That is Honda through and through right there. So yeah, I'm currently waiting on an ECU in the mail. Hopefully that's going to fix my problem. I was just beginning to clean up and repair this harness, and I said I should probably stop and take a little video of this just so we can see where we're at. Another good thing I noticed is that this bike is not one of the ones that has the HISS system, which is like Honda ignition security system, I think, or something like that. The keys basically have a chip in them. The ignition has a receiver that reads the chip and tells the ECU, all right, it's the right key, you can start. I don't have to deal with any of that nonsense. I can just grab an ECU out of any 02 to I think 05 or 06 VFR. I picked one up out of an 04. Another minor thing I noticed was that front brake light switch isn't working. I think a lot of the little things like that, Like I think there was a signal light or two that didn't seem to be working either, but I got them working after cleaning out the contacts. That brake switch is probably a similar idea because apparently this bike sat for a couple of years after it had the electrical incident. It's just been waiting for someone to fix it. Hopefully that someone's me. I don't want to be the guy to part it out. So yeah, that's the VFR. Hopefully there'll be a video coming soon where it's fully assembled and running. Because I really want to hear what it sounds like. I want to hear what those handles sound like on this V4. That's got to be good. So yeah, stay tuned.